You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. Today we welcome to the program photographer and editor Joan Liftin and Michelle Dunn Marsh, founder and publisher of Minor Matters Books. We're going to be talking with each of them about their individual projects, but we're also going to discuss the person that brings them together, the late photographer Charles Harbut. Joan, of course, was married to Charles and was his collaborator. Michelle recently published a book of Charles' work that includes Harbut's thoughts on photography and art in general, which we're going to be talking about shortly. We also plan on discussing the unique business model that Minor Matters employs to create their beautiful catalog of photography books. Joan Liftin has worked as a photographer, photo book editor, and teacher. She's the author of 3 photo books, Drive-Ins in 2004, Marseille in 2015, and Water for Tears in 2018. Liftin was chair of the documentary program at the International Center of Photography from 1988 to 2000 and the director of Magnum Photos Library. She's edited numerous books, including Mary Ellen Mark's Falkland Road and Charles Harbut's Departures and Arrivals. In 2017, her archive was acquired by the Center for Creative Photography in Tucson, Arizona. Welcome to the show, Joan.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay. Now, Michelle Dunn Marsh knows from book publishing. Before starting Minor Matters, she was the co-publisher of Aperture and deputy director of the Aperture Foundation. She was also the senior editor of Art and Design and is the former executive director at the Photographic Center Northwest in Seattle. Michelle has also curated a number of significant exhibitions, including Jim Marshall's The Rolling Stones in 1972. He was also the topic of a recent episode we did. Love his work. Here I Am, Lisa Leone at the Bronx Museum, and Eugene Richards' Enduring Freedom at the Photographic Center Northwest. We welcome both of you. Let's start with Joan and talk about your book, Water for Tears from 2018, and then we're going to segue to talk about Charles Harbut and his new book from Minor Matters. So Joan, Water for Tears, it's quite a poetic title, and the book is a memoir, photographs from a lifetime of work and travel partnership. How'd you come up with that title?
I stole it from my grandson.
All right.
It's a story I'd like to tell you. The book really was originally called Runaway, and it came out of a request from Adriana Latourni of Azura. Adriana had asked me for a portfolio, and I forgot about it all till the deadline came. So I was really rushed, and I thought, I'm just not going to sweat this. I'm going to pick out the photographs that I really love, that are very personal. And I did them quickly. I picked out about 35. She ran it. And then I felt that there was no subject tying them together except my point of view. So Adriana suggested, and I did it. She asked me to write a paragraph or two about it. So I wrote a paragraph about that at 8 years old or 9 years old, my greatest desire was to become a runaway. I had seen lots of movies about runaways. And she published it, and then I liked it, so I made a personal book, a handmade book of the pictures. But it wasn't enough pictures. It was only 50 pages. So I couldn't get a book out of it. And I put it away. That was about 10 years ago. So in a way, switch forward, Charlie died in 2015, and the family came over, of course, to my apartment, and we were all together. And Jasper, who was about 20 at the time, is an artist, and he was drawing a picture. And when everybody left later, he gave me the picture he had drawn. And what it was a kind of a cartoonish drawing of himself drinking a large glass of water and an even larger tear falling down his eye. And he wrote underneath it, "Water for tears, don't dry up out there." And he spelled there D-E-R-E. And it was perfect. It was just, it was so much him. But I put it away. And then sometime later, I realized that was the title. I could use that as a title of a memoir, which I had been thinking about since Runaway. So I decided that I would do much of the same pictures with an additional 50 or so, call it Water for Tears, and the book would be about personal work and trips I had taken, important trips to me that I had taken either with or without Charlie. The point was that I added a paragraph to the Runaway intro in which I said that although I was a runaway, I was very lucky in my life because I was always very happy to come back to the people that I loved. It's a long story.
What is it that this idea of running away or being away and traveling that is so tied to a lot of photography? I mean, do they go hand in hand?
I don't think we go into it for that reason, but it happens to be a perfect profession for wannabe runaways.
Right. But there is something about, not just tourists, but photographers when they are in a new place or when they're on the road or even, photos from airplanes and cars. It just seems that you want to pick up your camera when you're out there. It's really part and parcel.
Well, when you become very familiar with your surroundings, I mean, I'm a New Yorker, and it's hard for me to do any extended shooting in New York. There's always the adventure and excitement of seeing something new. I mean, that was like my book, Marseille. I love France. I lived there in my early 20s for a couple of years, but I never wanted to do Paris because everybody had shot Paris. And Marseille felt more like where I'd grown up, which was Brooklyn. I mean, it was a much rattier town. I write about this a little bit, yeah.
I grew up in Brooklyn, and I've never heard anybody compare Brooklyn to Marseille. I'm going to have to get into this one a little bit.
Have you ever been to
Marseille? No.
Okay,
but,
go. You'll find
okay.
it. You'll find it. I mean, it's a lot of hustlers, clowns. It's very integrated. It's one of the most integrated, if not the most integrated city in Europe.
Yeah, but did they have candy stores and Italian social clubs? That's what I'm curious about because we're comparing it to Brooklyn. But we'll get back to it another time.
More Italian. Well, this would make me feel good. That is the biggest ethnic group in Marseille of immigrants is Italians.
Ah, okay, all right. Now I'm starting to put the piece together. Okay, now it makes sense.
So, Joan, after the the moment where you realized you had a title and you wanted to expand the book, how did the editing process change? I mean, were you looking for a more comprehensive view or a look back? Did you choose photos that you might not have otherwise chosen? And how did that process work for you?
Well, that goes to the heart of editing. And basically, I don't earn my living as a photographer. I don't know if anybody does anymore. But I do earn my living editing books and teaching. So for me, this was going to be a very personal book. Now, you can't really do a memoir. I mean, I didn't come out of, I wasn't born with a camera in my hand. In fact, I didn't start photographing till I was over 30. I was a dancer before. I had to find some form for the book. And since I started it with a text that I liked about being a runaway, because it goes on for 2 pages and it really said what I wanted to say, I decided that I would tie it to trips that were important to me. For example, a trip, including one that I didn't go on, which was to Mississippi. It was an important trip to me because I didn't go on it, and that was during the Civil Rights days, and I was afraid to go to Mississippi. The other trips were more evocative in different ways. So I had an idea of what I wanted to do, and the better pictures were in the trips that I enjoyed more. It wasn't just the better pictures; I had made them sort of my own. It wasn't journalism, particularly. It was an expression of my response to a place. and my imagination that was fired up by the place.
I have a question for you. When you're talking about editing photographs, now you said there were 35 photographs at the end that went into the book.
No, 35 went into the little runaway book, and it was like
Okay.
50 pages. But then I don't know how many pictures exactly are in Water for Tears, but the book is like 130, 135 pages. So it more than doubled. It more than doubled in size.
Well, see, here's my question. You're talking about two things right now. We're talking about photographs, and we're also talking about stories and background stories and little vignettes that went into the photograph that may or may not be obvious to it. And I think one of the things that people have problems with, and I'm including myself when it comes to editing our own work in particular, and perhaps even somebody else's work who we're close to, is that you often blur the quality of the photograph to the story that went along with it. I mean, I learned early on that, I have some pictures. There's such a great story behind this picture. The picture isn't that great. Without the story, it's nothing. Just the fact that you got the picture might be great, but that the picture isn't good itself. You're talking equal value here between the story and the photograph. And when you were editing, did you have a hard time deciding, is it the story or is it the photograph, or does it not matter in this case?
That goes really to the heart of it. I don't edit for story. In fact, I tell my students, don't think of story and don't think of subject. And instead of editing in, I tell them to edit out. That way they'll see what the narrative of their work is. There's a difference between a story, because a story is prone to exactly what you're talking about, that you pick less good pictures. So I edit first for the pictures that I like. Now, there were trips. I've made many trips in my life, photographic trips. I worked for the United Nations for a while as UNICEF's photographer and a photo editor. And so I've had a lot of trips. It was that I looked at what the trips were like. And in some of them, the shooting was much more lyrical and much more personal. It didn't matter where I went. It mattered what the pictures looked like. So it wasn't to fill a story need. Plus, the book isn't just about going on trips. It's also about coming home. So there's a lot of family pictures in the book. Let me backtrack for a minute. I was Magnum's librarian in New York, and there was no way that I was tempted to compete with them journalistically, or with my husband journalistically. So my work always started out being more intimate and about family to start with. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's sort of how I work on my own work.
No, I get that. I find it's hard to sometimes verbalize these kind of things. I mean, I put together projects that were deeply personal to me, and I find it's a hard thing to try to separate, what makes it an interesting photograph and where does the story fit into it and what's better. But you did answer it, and it's kind of a hard thing. And ultimately, it's just it's what you feel, I think, and you have to go by your gut.
Right. That's very good. That's good. Also, what happens, like, if you pick by story, you start justifying, you're picking just what you said, which was that you're justifying the use of that picture because it fits a storyline. I try not to do that, because some of the pictures I use to fit into the trips have nothing to do basically with the place. It may be, it may be a landscape, or it could be an abstraction, or it could be something else. The picture is interesting to me. The frame is good. It's evocative, and I can use it to change the pace, and as contrast to the money pictures of, okay, this is the port, but then there's an ugly fish in the fish market, and I'll do a real close up of that face. See what I mean?
One of the things that struck me about looking at the photographs is that I never would have had my camera at the ready for many of those pictures. They're fleeting moments. And the feeling I had for a lot of these images is the same kind of feeling I get, say, when I'm in a car or on a train, I'm looking out the window or passing by, even just walking quickly down the street. I see a photograph but it's gone real fast.
Right.
And I'm moving. I don't have time to catch it. It seems a lot of these pictures were those moments that were actually caught. And,
Right.
and it struck me many times.
Well, that's a one. I mean, you really described the process beautifully. That's exactly what I'm after. I mean, it's a spontaneous response to things that I can trust in myself, even if the picture, let's say, reveals something negative about me, or it's not exactly the kind of frame I really like. If the picture has energy, I know that it's right. I have to tell you, it's wonderful to answer your questions. They're really wonderful questions.
Okay, then. Thank you. Good answers too.
We're doing good, John. We're at the okay today.
All right. This is my question. It links back a little bit to what you said earlier, Joan, about the book, which is there's no subject or cohesive theme linking them. It's just your point of view. And I guess this question I'll throw toward Michelle a bit, but it really is for both of you. I mean, is there some kind of formula that dictates otherwise when you're thinking about publishing a book? I mean, is a cohesive theme, whatever it happens to be, something that publishers kind of want because it's just therefore a little easier to package and sell?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think that the answer really depends on who the publisher is, because different publishers are looking for a different kind of market penetration. So what, for instance, worked at Chronicle, or what Abrams or Abbeville may be looking for might be quite different than what Aperture or Minor Matters or Chris Graves Projects is looking for. And so in some of those cases, particularly with smaller independent publishers, you find people, the editors or heads of those presses, leaning toward personal vision, I would say. And as you are looking to move a larger quantity of books into the marketplace, sometimes that moves more toward definable thematic space that you can quantify that there might be an audience out there in the world who would purchase it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in the case of the publishing we're talking about here, the point of view is the cohesive theme, right? I mean, that's what the people are after. And I assume, the familiarity with the artist makes a big difference. But as you put in your mission statement there, Michelle, turning people on to new work and lesser known work is part of the fun. So
very much so. And I think Damiani, who Joan has worked with and who also published Charlie's Departures and Arrivals, is one of those publishers that has really, they also published my friend Lisa Carezzi. They've done a nice job, as many publishers have, of really making space for books that are about personal point of view.
Yeah. And bringing up Departures and Arrivals, Joan, can we talk a bit about maybe the process of editing that and the collaboration aspect compared to, I mean, you've collaborated with many photographers, but in this case with Charles, comparing it to perhaps, Water for Tears, in that process. Any comments?
Sure. Well, the designer was Yolanda Como, who is just absolutely terrific. And Charlie made a pre-edit of about 180 pictures. But we told him that we couldn't work with him there. Which he swallowed, and he understood it completely, because you can work with one person, but you can't have a committee of 3 people. And what usually happens if the photographer is there, when the designer and the editor are together, the photographer is usually crestfallen at the pictures that you're putting to the side, and that all their stepchildren, all the babies that they love that are not going into the book is going to be on their minds. And with Charlie, he knew that this would be true, because he's also a teacher and he knows how it works a little bit. So I asked him to either he work with Yolanda or I work with Yolanda, and then we would show him the work every 2 weeks. so that he could have all the input he wanted at that point, but not during the process. So
Was he happy with your? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What were you going to ask? Was he happy with that?
Yeah, how did at each of these 2-week intervals? How did he take it? Because again, I've been on that end. I think a few of us have here, and it's very humbling, and it puts you to the challenge of exactly how much you trust other people.
Charlie is and was a real professional, and he also, he wrote about this in the back of the book that he had a lot of trust in me and Yolanda, and he also knew that he had the complete final word on everything.
Okay. That makes a difference then.
So that we showed it to him every 2 weeks, but we basically did it. Charlie was a wonderful editor for somebody else's work, and he was a great editor for his own work, but not necessarily putting together a book like Departures and Arrivals for himself.
At the end of the project, did he look at it and go, "Yep, you did it right. Good job"? Was he okay with it?
He was absolutely. This sounds self-serving, but he was absolutely thrilled with what Yolanda and I did.
Okay.
He felt really seen, and many of the children that we put out at first went back in as we did the book. It was a process for both me and Yolanda, also working with his work. Plus, Charlie was quite a beautiful photographer. The work was stunning. So it was a delicious project, basically.
Well put, Joan.
And it was done. We had different concerns. For example, Departures and Arrivals starts with a section on America, and the second section is a section on Mexico. And the point of that was that Charlie has had a long-standing hostility to some of the things that goes on in America. So many of the pictures were critical of the States and its political situations and so on. These were not spelled out. It was a generic kind of look at the country. And then we wanted to follow it with a picture, and he had the pictures. It's the pictures that gave us the ideas for the sections, not that we made sections out of thin air. So the next section was Mexico, which Charlie loved. He just loved the pace of life there. He loved the street life. He loved everything. Everything. It was a much more humanistic society where everything was out on the streets. So we followed the first section with the second section. So you had a view of his political and emotional views of two different societies. And that just came out of the work itself. It wasn't like it was imposed on it. So he felt seen by us.
And was there ever a photo that he didn't choose initially that you might have went back and said, "Hey, what about this one?"
Definitely. There were definitely photographs that I had trouble with, but Yolanda didn't.
And, but even prior to that first, group of photos that were pulled out by him to make the selection from, did you offer an idea on, what, you didn't even include this photo that I love so much, or something like that? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, sure. Right. All the time.
Did you guys always talk about photography? Was there always an editing conversation going?
No. We had lots. We had lots to talk about. He was an extremely entertaining and interesting man.
Yeah, certainly feels that way, I can say. And maybe we could talk a little bit about this kind of change that came to photography or came to photojournalism along with the changes of the 60s. Did he consider it new and forward-thinking, or even was it a bit of a return to an older kind of photography where injecting the personal point of view in a way, or a metaphoric way, was more important than quote unquote the story itself?
Oh, well, that's absolutely a description of what happened to Charlie. Is that he was in Magnum. In fact, he was president of it twice, and he was an extremely successful photojournalist. He really had a wonderfully editorial mind that he could do a narrative or a story very, very well. But he felt, and this was very strong with him, that by 75, well, one thing happened to him that summed up what he'd been feeling for a while, which was that he went to cover a demonstration for, I think it was for Look, a magazine in New Haven, and it was supposed to be the students. And Look felt that there was going to be real trouble at this demonstration. It was being pumped up by the media as this was going to be violent or something. So he went down there. He registered in the hotel at the Sheraton. At the same time, the three guys with DC plates from Washington came in, and they were obviously government guys who signed up for the Sheraton also. The next day, the demonstration went on. It was very peaceful, and lo and behold, three guys burst through the group on the fringes of it, dressed as hippies with their short hair covered with handkerchiefs, and they were pushing people around and so on. So it was a demonstration that they were aiming at destroying and so on. And that kind of summed up as a metaphor what he'd been feeling about working for the media for quite a while, that the stories were pre-planned. I mean, they didn't know, Look didn't know this was going to happen, but this is what was happening. The events was being staged. And so he stopped being a photojournalist, and he writes about it in Departures and Arrivals. He started to teach to earn a living. He still photographed, but all his photography began to do. He said he wasn't going to do the kings and queens anymore. He was going to do, like the picture, one of the pictures that's in Michelle's book, bedclothes on a Sunday morning, in Brooklyn.
Right. Was there a disillusionment though that came with this, or did it maybe spark?
I think it freed him.
A new awakening.
Was it what did you call it?
A disillusion? Disillusionment?
Yes, very much so. But he wasn't a babe in the woods, but it was a complete disillusion with the media and the use to which pictures are put. And in fact, that's what the book that Michel so wonderfully published, which is a speech of his calling himself the Unconcerned photographer. He wasn't going to be concerned. He wasn't going to be told what to be concerned about.
Mm-hmm. That's a pretty perfect segue, Michelle.
Indeed.
I've been taking too much airtime. One last word, which was that I always tell my students that Jean-Luc Godard, someone complained about his movies to him, saying, you don't have a beginning, a middle, and an end for your movies. I love your movies, but you don't have a beginning or middle and an end for your movies. And Godard said, yes, I do, but not necessarily in that order.
Well, I mean, the viewer has to do some work too. That's the way I look at it.
Well, that's
absolutely. I mean, that is one of my favorite quotes from Minor White, was that really the viewer is responsible for completing the photograph. And as someone who is not a photographer, for me, those words became extremely important because it meant that I had a real place in the medium, a legitimate place in the medium, as someone who was not making pictures, but who professionally has been viewing them for the last 25 years.
That's a really good point. Yeah. I mean, as a photographer, but as a viewer before a photographer, we're all viewers, I guess, before photographers. I think we have to feel that place to kind of take the next steps, maybe. Let's talk a bit about The Unconcerned Photographer and maybe how you first became aware of this as a possible book, Michelle, and the essay itself and along those.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll back up for just a moment to say that I actually met Charlie in the early 90s. Is that we determined, Joan? I was a student at Bard College, and he occasionally photographed there. And I didn't know who Charlie was, but I was working as an intern in the publications office, and he was a sweet little guy, and I always enjoyed interacting with him when he came into the office. And so when I moved to New York City and was in graduate school and started working at Aperture, I saw this poster for a project that Aperture had done called Magnum Paris. And the credit to the photograph on that poster was Charles Harbit. And I kind of stopped and was like, wait, that sweet guy who was so unassuming and always just good for a laugh, he's important. And that sort of became a theme throughout my early years at Aperture, is just realizing how many incredible people I was having the opportunity to encounter. And I reconnected with Charlie and met Joan for the first time in the mid-2000s. And I was working at Chronicle, and I proposed a book with Charlie there. And so we stayed in touch on and off. And in fact, Charlie and Joan let me stay in their apartment early in the days of Minor Matters. So David Hilliard's book was actually edited in Charlie and Joan's apartment. And we thought we were surrounded by good energy by being in that space. So I read Travelogue probably sometime maybe 10 years ago. And there were some, what to me were sort of radical notions about photography that Charlie was expressing there. And late last year, I was doing some research online, and I came across a transcript of this speech that he had given in 1970. And I saw in it the origins of many of the points that he went on to explore and discuss further in Travelogue. And I was very excited. And I contacted Joan and said, has this been published? Is this in the world? Would it be possible for us to work on this together? That took me to trying some new things through Minor Matters. I was considering whether or not we would have a space at what used to be APAD's photography show, what was due this spring to be Perry Photo New York, and realizing that none of our new books would be in print if, in fact, we were going to be at that art fair. And so I was trying to think of something that I could do relatively quickly that we might be able to have available as a new project. And so that was the beginning point. I contacted Joan, I think late December, maybe even January, and we began the dialogue that resulted in this book, of course, in spite of the fact that there was no art fair and the cancellation of many other opportunities for us to gather together in person.
And what was it that struck you about the essay itself or the talk itself? Is something I always imagine that it has to be something that makes it relevant to the moment, to our moment now, that maybe was ahead of its time. Is that fair to say?
There's so much language that Charlie used that was ahead of its time, that was relevant to its time, but that really is, it sounds very cliche to say timeless, but really is timeless. I think the paragraph that's on the back cover of the book is one that is most often quoted out of context, which is Charlie saying photography is not art. And it's really easy to just drop that line somewhere, and you will get very vehement responses, both in support of that statement and against that statement. But the language of this speech really explores that idea and backs up where that statement came from for him. I think in addition to that, in reading it, so much of what he is talking about in terms of concern about American politics, decline of media, why perhaps media is in decline, and yet the challenges within that, so much of that felt like he was describing what was happening right now. And because I believe that knowing history is important, the opportunity to not take a text that was written today, but in fact take a text that was written 50 years ago to perhaps mirror back to photography and mirror back to the American public. This isn't the first time we've been here. Can we learn from this and do better?
Well, on that same line, I mean, it always struck me that, almost 50 years to the day of Kent State, we had a parallel thing going on here where, National Guardsmen are attacking, citizens. And it struck me. It was almost 50 years to the day. And I remember that. I was in the School of Visual Arts when all that was going on.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that from a generational standpoint, because this was certainly something, and Joan, jump in here, this was something that came up in lovely ways in our conversations. I feel enormously privileged that I have worked with many people who were far more chronologically advanced than I was. And when you're working together in the passionate, deep community of photography, you don't really stop and look around and say, is that person 80 or 60 or 30? You're working together. And so it's not something that I've really thought about. And at the same time, Joan and I were having conversations about things. I wasn't born when Charlie gave this speech. So as much as I connect to much of what's in it, my experience of it is in fact different than Joan's experience or Charlie's experience, or perhaps John and Alan, your experiences. And so being able to say, I didn't live this, yet it still matters. And I'm bringing information from my viewpoint and this generation to these words, and we can have a conversation about it. And we're not going to necessarily interpret everything the same way, and that's okay.
Well, I think one of the good things about looking back on things in many ways, you know, like we're living through electric times right now. Ben, I'm using a very gentle word to by calling it electric times. You know, but the truth of the matter is, we're not going to really understand everything that is happening today for another 50 years, because you need time for all of this stuff to settle down and all of the stories to come forward and perspectives. And you need a little bit of hindsight, you know, making history happens by the moment. Okay. But it takes decades, I think, to understand exactly what happened. It's the same thing.
Absolutely. And I think, to go back to your initial question, which was what did I read in this that really resonated? It's that, right? It's understanding that part of what was resonating for me now is the reality of what happened 50 years ago and seeing those parallels.
Let me ask real quickly then about the photos that were included, because clearly, I mean, because this is not quote unquote a photo book, but photos are part of it. How did you make that selection?
Joan. Now, we have to get into some of the fun of what has been really one of the richest dialogues for me throughout the last 6 months, has been the conversations that I've had with Joan. So I'm just going to start out by saying that my original intention was not to have any photographs with this. My original intention was that this would be an essay book. And part of that was guided by the decision to try out a book print on demand. And because the reproduction of photographs is something that's incredibly important to me, it's something that was taught to me when I was at Aperture, and that I definitely hold in high regard in what we do through Minor Matters. If I couldn't reproduce photographs in the best way I know how, I would rather not reproduce photographs.
Yeah, well,
Thank you.
Joan said, what did Joan say?
You have to have photographs, Michelle. He's a photographer. I mean, he was an intellectual, no question, but and it doesn't matter so much. I certainly agree with Michelle about the reproduction, how important it is in a book. But a book that's a speech by a photographer, I mean, the way you don't know the quality of the photographer unless you see some of his pictures. Even if the photographs are not reproduced that well, they're there, and you can still see what he was doing and what the photograph. They're good enough. They'll do. And it was important to show the quality of his work, even though it was only 4 pictures and a cover. That was enough, I felt, but that it was important to put them in. And Michelle was very giving on that question.
And we tested.
But we had a lot of talks about it.
Yeah, we tested out what they would look like. We did a sample of the book with some of the images to see what the reproduction quality could be like. And Joan, if I'm remembering correctly, you also chose pictures that we knew would speak, even within exactly within this kind of printing environment.
Yeah. And not certainly not the more complex of Charlie's pictures, but the ones that were powerful.
Well, it was an interesting scenario also because Joan and I are both editors. We have both been involved in the editing of photography books and in the sequencing of photography books. We both have strong opinions, to put it mildly. And so this really, and Joan, I'm just going to dive in here, and you can add whatever you feel comfortable adding. But, there were at least two moments where we both had expressed something that was very important to us that put the possibility of this book existing on the line and saying, I don't see how I can move forward if we can't resolve X, for both of us. And the fact that, and I think this is particularly important in these electric times we're living in, the fact that neither of us gave up. And even though we bounced up very close to what felt like a wall, we found a way. We found a way forward. We found a way to work together, and the book exists. And so that dialogue, to me, I just want to thank Joan in this public forum for continuing to engage in that dialogue and expressing your viewpoint, but also being open to hearing mine.
Yes, I think that Michelle took issue with about 3 or 4 sentences at most. Am I right, Michelle?
Mm-hmm.
That she felt were racist.
No, I felt they were language of the time that we would not use today in discussing underrepresented populations.
It's a much better description of it, right. The question was, and people can read it for themselves. I mean, it was, it's like the way you refer, I'm told by my granddaughter, I should say people of color now, for example, and ways of referring to people. And I'm not talking about racist epithets at all. I'm talking about the way that the community of people sharing a language refer to people. And so, I mean, there were those kinds of questions, but we came to a solution, which was that Michelle would not cut those words out, but Charlie's speech would live as given. And that was my sticking point. And she suggested, which I agreed with and thought was a terrific solution, that she would put an editor's note at the back of the book saying what her feelings were. So we moved on. And I think it was Michelle's suggestion that we do that, which was wonderful because I did want the book out. I think that the speech speaks for itself and that you can see the man behind the speech very clearly.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. We're going to go down, drop a few quarters in the meter, and come back with Michelle and Joan and talk about Minor Matters and the Unconcerned Photographer and Charles Harbert. Stay tuned.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. The best way to support the show is by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For links to gear and more information on today's guests, check out the show notes in your podcast app or visit our homepage on the B&H Explorer website and join the B&H Photography Podcast Facebook group. And now, back to the show.
Okay, we are back. Minor Matters has published books by Paul Berger, India Beale, David Hilliard, and many other photographers. Their goal is to highlight underrepresented voices in contemporary art, recognizing that significant art might stay on the fringes without the support of a community. Their books are funded by pre-sales, and everyone who buys a book in pre-sale is listed as a co-publisher. That's an interesting twist. Michelle, how'd you come up with this method? This is kind of novel.
Well, It really started with seeing in the early issues of Aperture all of the subscribers named in the back of the magazine. And I had a couple of issues from the 1950s, and I was so fascinated with seeing that, for instance, Irving Berlin was a subscriber to Aperture. And again, we've talked a little bit about history. I loved that record. I loved knowing that this person, at a moment in time when very few people knew about this publication, had chosen to be a part of it. And at the time, I'd been with Aperture for many years. I had worked with Chronicle, and I was noticing in the early 2000s that there were a lot of projects that were not finding their way to publishers. And there were publishers who were coming to me saying, I'm interested in the photographers that you think are important and should be published, and photographers who, of course, photographers always want books, but we weren't quite meeting in the middle in terms of the quality of the reproduction of the book and meeting the demands of the marketplace and how expensive it is to produce photography books. So I started thinking about the aspects that I could do myself and what parts of the food chain of publishing we might be able to think about in a slightly different way. And again, turning to history and noting that Edward Weston and Ansel Adams had often said that they were going to do a publication or said they were going to do a portfolio, and they sold those things in advance as a way of generating the capital to then produce the portfolio. I thought, well, why can't we do that with books? And Amazon had made it comfortable for people to buy online. And so that was really the point of origin. There were books I wanted to own that I couldn't get any other publisher to make, is really the short answer. And so we came up with this model of 500 pre-sales results in about $25,000, keeping a book at a $50 price point, which felt accessible. That was important. And one of the key elements to continuing to be here today to talk to you about it is that I realized that in addition to being a publishing company, this needed to be an e-commerce business, which was something I knew nothing about. And so I partnered with a former student of mine, Steve McIntyre, who's a web and app developer. And thanks to his expertise, we managed to launch and have published 20 books to date.
So how many, when you put out you announce a book that you want to go into production with, who is the average person who's buying into this? And how long does it take you to hit 500 pre-sales?
That's a great question. So when I developed the business plan, we'd sort of broken audiences for books down into collectors, fellow creatives, fellow photographers and artists, friends and family, and then, of course, the sort of mysterious, elusive bucket, going back to what we were talking about earlier, of is this a theme? Is there a subject matter that is going to draw another audience of interest? And when we first launched, we really followed a lot of traditional book publishing. So we would give a book a 6-month life to sell. What we learned in the online environment is that 6 months is an incredibly long time. It's hard to sustain people's interest. And so we moved to a 3-month pre-sales period. We often find within the first month whether or not there's serious interest for a book to move forward.
And what kind of criteria do you use, if I may ask? And maybe this is a hard thing to do. I mean, obviously, a pile of photographs shows up on your desk, and you're going to know whether you like them or not. But do you have any certain preconditions for a book topic?
Well, I had worked in publishing for some time before starting this, so I think that's also very important. Is having worked at Aperture as a designer, having worked at Chronicle as an editor, working freelance with a number of museums, I had seen different successes and challenges in publishing. And when we started, we had no idea if any of these books would move forward. And when we were developing our business plan, and at one point talking to potential investors, which we did not, that's not a route we ended up going, but people kept saying, well, what's your exit strategy? And I was like, I don't know. I don't want to fail. Why would I have an exit strategy? And what they really meant was, at what point would you sell the business? And I said, well, I don't want to do that either. Steve and I were in agreement on that. And so we looked at each other and said, well, how about if we launch 10 books and none of them make it to print? Then this idea doesn't work. And we both felt like that was a good plan. We would launch 10 books. And in our first 5 books, we produced 3 of 5. So there's no magic formula. And I think it's important to remember that every publisher, when they commit to a book, wants that book to succeed. It's just a little more public when our books don't find their audience.
Did you have any books that went out there and say you got maybe 200 pre-sales and it was coming in on the deadline, and then either the photographer or somebody just said, to hell with it, and just bought whatever books were needed to hit the 500 number?
That's a really good question. So because I have worked in the nonprofit space for a long time and did a lot of fundraising, we actually put into our contract that it is at our discretion whether or not we accept funding from outside parties and from the photographer. Because one of the important elements of our transparency about our process is meeting so many photographers who have taken second mortgages on their houses, who've taken out bank loans in order to fund book projects.
Sure.
And it's very difficult to make that money back. And so it's really important to us that we're not making books just for our ego or for the ego of the photographer. We really do believe that if something is going to find its way forward as a book, which is an expensive investment, that there's a village behind it, that there's a community behind it. So it's not simply about how to get the dollars together. It's also about demonstrating that there's an audience. Now, with that being said, have there been exceptions? Absolutely. We did a book with Adrian Chesser, and we sold, I think, 150 copies. And the printer who I'd done a test run with, when I contacted them, I said, I'm sorry, this book's not moving forward. The other books are moving forward. And the printer was so committed to that project, which was about Adrian's experience of telling friends that he had been diagnosed with AIDS, that they discounted the other books we were printing to the exact dollar amount that would allow us to print that book.
Wow. Okay. That's committal.
And that was an investment we decided to accept.
Yeah.
And that's the community you're talking about. That's wonderful.
Exactly.
A couple of quick questions, if I may. Of the kind of groups that you described earlier, family and friends, other artists, collectors, and then, the hopeful other group, what group surprised you the most in terms of, ponying up money? I mean, as a way to say it. Is there anything that surprised you when it came to who was investing, at least early on? Or I guess investing isn't the right word, but maybe it is, contributing.
Yeah, well, we do see it as an investment. I mean, I have always loved publishing. I thought the only way you could be in publishing was to be a writer. And so I've always wanted to be a part of making books. And I think when you see your name in a book, even if you're not the author of the book, when you see your name in a book, it's a pretty exciting moment. And so one of the reasons we recognize co-publishers by naming them is to give them that sense that they are, in fact, a part of something. And I would say what was the most surprising to me, 2 things. One, and of course, this is me being a book person and not really thinking about how the internet works. We almost immediately started getting inquiries from international buyers, individuals who had learned about a book and wanted to buy it. And we had no international shipping set up on our website because we just didn't think that would be a thing. And so that there was interest internationally, that somehow people had heard of us was exciting and surprising to me. And we also relatively early on within the first year had people coming to us and saying, look, I just want to commit to everything you do, I don't want to miss a deadline. I don't want to miss one of your titles. Come up with a way that I can just have every book. And so our legacy publisher program is people who commit in advance to every book we launch, and their credit card number is on file. And we have now 20 people in that program. That was not a program we initiated. That was a program that our audience came to us and said, solve this problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. I mean, it's this kind of hybrid between, a membership, at a public radio station or a GoFundMe, all these kind of things get together. And then, of course, as you mentioned, there is this pride of being part of the process. It's really wonderful.
Very much so. Yeah.
And what stage of the design do you present it to the public, or, the public really, to make their decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, again, having worked in book publishing, my goal is to present everything that would be in a traditional catalog page that would go out to bookstores. So that means knowing the trim size, knowing the page count, having an approximate number of images, having a cover, having a rough design and spreads that show what the book is going to look like. And so there's an enormous amount of sweat equity that goes into every project. I sometimes question how important that is to the public. I think the public often looks at a project and says, I'm interested in this photographer or author. I'm interested in this work, and would likely commit without all of that effort. But that effort for me, as Joan was discussing earlier, that editing, that sequencing, the conception of what the book will be, the bookness of the book is really important. And so we get through the approval of all of those details before we go out into the world.
For each project, you guys take on the lion's share of the decisions in terms of, okay, this project, once it's brought to you, needs this designer or this printer or this editor, or are you guys handling most of that yourselves? And what's the relationship with the photographer when they come in, or how often are the projects somewhat completed?
We work very closely with the photographers in development and of the book and concepting of the book. We are a 2-person company. So Steve does all of the online back end, anything that involves the screen, that is his realm, as well as any of the logistics of the sales systems that we use and the banking systems that we use. I do marketing, I do editing, I do design. Yes, I do all of those things. We bring in a copy editor who works with us on the text. But that is largely to be able to produce a $50,000 to $75,000 book for $25,000.
Oh,
is the short answer to that.
That whole reason, yeah. But you will. I mean, based on every project, you work with different folks. I mean, you're not gonna. It's not like you have kind of a team set up that's going to give the books some kind of uniform look, or I mean, there's a different designer for each one, right? I imagine. Beyond
the $50 price point, we work really hard for there to not be a formula. And I think that very much comes out of the time that I spent as a designer at Aperture and working under Michael Hoffman, of really looking at every book and understanding how it can evolve and exist. I mean, I really see my role as an editor and designer of books as a translator. How do I get to know the photographer's viewpoint, and how through the form of a book are we sharing that viewpoint with a broader audience of people? And as we were talking earlier, the notion of the viewer is important. So I will sometimes challenge the photographer in saying, I understand that this is your view, but the book is not just for you. It is, in fact, for all of these people who have already bought it. So we have to come to a happy agreement here, a space in the middle that addresses both of your viewpoint and allows your viewpoint to translate to them.
And can you put a percentage on how many books make it all the way to the finish line?
Yeah, 75%-ish.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, as we've continued, we've seen we've seen what projects are most likely to succeed. And more so than project, really, we've seen photographers at a certain point in their careers who perhaps have other support, whether it's a gallery or possibly an exhibition coming up. All of those things being said, India Beale, who her book is coming out in November, she doesn't have a gallery. She was just a powerhouse who has a lot of media attention for her work. And she worked really hard to make sure people knew that the book was for sale. It was her first book. We've done a few first books, and those definitely do well. But we've also found that people who are not emerging artists, but are at least 10 to 20 years into their career, have built up enough of an audience base for our model to be able to work for them.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's great. And well, let's jump then quickly to The Unconcerned Photographer, which to some degree doesn't fit the model that you put out. It's one of the exceptions, I guess. And the price reflects it. It's a $25 book. Can you? I mean, you did talk a little bit already about how the idea came to be, but did this type of book throw any monkey wrenches into the general way you do things?
Yes, I mean every aspect of this book was new.
Okay.
Is new. It's only been for sale for a couple of weeks, and at the same time, it's been a great experiment. And we've been in business for 7 years, and obviously this year for all businesses in all sectors is kind of unlike anything else, and it felt important to try something different. And so this was an opportunity to do a book at a lower price point, to do an essay book. I like words. Words matter to me, even though I love photography. And so to be able to engage a little bit in words by a photographer and see with a much smaller financial investment what it would be like to put a book out. My biggest concern was consistency of quality in the print-on-demand environment. So I actually, which is sort of illogical, but I ordered a bunch of books to come to us so I could see all of them and then re-shipped them out to the people who bought them.
Right.
So I'm paying for shipping twice, which
quality control. That's important.
It is quality control. The works have been consistent, so I think that we will probably shift from that to fulfilling orders in a true print-on-demand environment where the books are shipped directly to the person who has purchased them. But yes, it's a learning process, and I'm a perfectionist, so I don't give up on those elements too easily.
I have a question, if I may. You're talking about words and photographs, and I also believe that good words or a good essay accompanying photographs are pretty important. What percentage of photographers that you've published so far also wrote an essay or whatever text goes along with it? What percentage?
That's a really good question. I'm spinning around to look at my shelf. I would say maybe 50% have written something. Some of the books have interviews with the photographers or artists. All of the books have text. I think that is an important thing to state because, as Nancy Newhall once said, the relationship of great photographs and the right words really is its own third medium. And that's something that's always really resonated with me. One of the books that comes to mind for me is a book that we published in 2018 called Pine by Eric Johnson. And it's a really beautiful, particularly now that we're all, many of us have been in lockdown for much of this year. There are photographs of tree carvings, and they're very poignant and sort of take us back to a different moment in time. But when Eric presented this book, and he and I have known each other for many years, and I brought one of his books into Aperture, he was envisioning the work being presented with no text, and in fact had commissioned a group of musicians and was producing an LP to have music accompany the photographs instead of text. And I really pushed him on that to say, there's things that I know about you personally, about your life, about your role as a father, about losing your father, that inform this work. And if you don't share some of that, I feel like that's a loss to the person viewing this work. And in that case, he wrote really just as a kind of journal. He wrote a few paragraphs and shared it with me. And I cried when I read them. And I said, okay, that's all we need. This is what's going in the book.
My last question has to do with, what I guess sales on the back end. I mean,
Yes.
how many books will you publish after, in addition to the ones that are pre-bought? And again, what have you seen on that? Do they sell maybe more so after the book's out there and people, the word gets out? Is that just icing on the cake, or is that something that you kind of hope for and count on?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So first of all, we don't sell any of our books on Amazon. We never have. And we do work with independent bookstores. We work with a lot of museum stores. We work with other independent retailers. Even those retailers have to agree to not put our books on Amazon, because a lot of bookstores have necessary relationships with Amazon. We just felt like it was important to support small businesses. We are a small business. And so again, when we started, we really had no idea what the life of the book would be after that pre-sales process. The photographers, the authors all get 100 copies of the book when we start, so that they get that in lieu of an advance. And then if the sales exceed, I think it's 1,000 or 1,500 copies, then they get a royalty. But we really believe that what the photographers need the most are the books. And so we make sure that they have a lot. Up until
to sell however they want, or is that part of the no Amazon?
Yeah, they can sell them. They can sell them if they're doing like individual lectures. And then if we sell out of the books, then they can sell into the marketplace. So they don't sell directly. We manage the sales directly. But then once we're sold out, they can sell them on their website or wherever else they want to be able to sell them. And up until last year, about 30% of our revenue was coming from bookstore sales and museum stores. Of course, this year that's gone because most of those places aren't open. But we have seen that consumers coming directly to our website and buying books from us is staying pretty steady, which is fantastic.
That's great. Something I wanted to ask earlier: Can you pre-buy several books of the same book? And do people do that? Do bookstores do that, or is that a different arrangement?
We don't. That's a good question. We will work with galleries during the pre-sales process. We don't work with bookstores during the pre-sales process because it's too confusing for them to issue a purchase order for something that may not happen. And it also changes the financial model because you're selling to bookstores at a wholesale rate. So we really focus on selling direct to consumer during that pre-sales period. That said, there are people who buy multiple copies of books. Sometimes they do that as gifts to be able to name other people in the book. Sometimes businesses will buy. So for instance, Red Bull bought, I think 100, maybe 200 copies of Lisa Leone's book because they wanted to give it as a holiday gift. And they received logo credit in the book for making that commitment in advance. And they bought the book at retail. But we did a special insert for them for those books because they were giving it out to their employees.
Is that something that you would look at on, say, a regular basis? Say a book was coming out and there was some kind of a company or a product that could be associated with it. Would you reach out to them and saying, we're doing this, here's a copy or sample copy? Would you be interested in helping to fund it? Is that something you actively do, or it just happened to come up in that one instance?
We will do anything we can to move a book forward into production, is the short answer to that.
Alan, did you have something in mind?
So if it's good for the photographer and it's good for the book and it's good for the public.
And no mammals get hurt in the process, it's all good, right? No small animals are injured.
I have as a curator once said to me very recently, Michelle, integrity is not really profitable. I I maintain a high level of integrity. So if we can find a way with integrity to move something forward, it absolutely happens.
Gotcha. Okay, Joan, absolute pleasure talking with you. If people want to catch up on more of your work, where can they go to? And if they want to learn more about Water for Tears and get a copy of it, perhaps, where can they go?
Thank you for asking. They can order it directly from me so they can get a signed copy. Water for Tears, any one of the 3 books I've done are available. Water for Tears, Marseille, and drive-ins are all $50 each, plus $4 for shipping. And I'm very good at shipping them out quickly. You can just write me at my email, joan.liftin, which is LIFTIN, @gmail.com. One other thing is they can find it also on my Visura website, which is joanliftin.com.
And Joan, you have copies of Departures and Arrivals for sale also, right?
Yes, I do. Indeed, I do. There's one thing I have that's now closed these days, but books.
Cool. Well, at least you have your priorities straight. That's all I can tell you. And Michelle, people want to catch up with what you're up to. Where can they be going to?
Yes. www.minormattersbooks.com. We have The Unconcerned Photographer for sale. We also have our 3 forthcoming new books that can be purchased now. And I guess we'll announce it here for the first time. We have a couple of titles in reprint. So do please check out the website.
Ooh, nice. Reprints are nice. That's good.
They are indeed. First time.
Okay, that's another show. If you'd like to be the first on your block to know when a new episode of the B&H Photography Podcast goes live, all you have to do is subscribe to the show. If you're not a subscriber, head on over to wherever you subscribe to podcasts and type B&H Photography Podcast into the search field, and boom, you are family. You can also find us on the B&H Explorer website. For now and the immediate future, on behalf of John Harris and Jason Tables, my name is Alan Weitz, and thank you so much for tuning in today.